Thanks, Sue. There we go. Got that. I'm going to share my screen with everyone. And thanks for taking some time out of your days to talk about and participate in this session, which is differentiating information and data governance. So we'll do our best to do that over the next 2 hours. No, that's a joke. We'll do this within an hour, so crunch time. We're gonna try to go through this. It was interesting to me as well as I was putting this presentation together. So there's some, historical stuff here, like how did we get from, where do we come from? How did we get here? So the nostalgia of going back and looking at some of the stuff that happened not too long ago was kind of surprising and shocking. Maybe not a great way. Anyway, so just getting started. Data versus, let me try and move this, sorry. Data versus information. This is a very high level. I mean, both terms are used interchangeably quite often. But the general idea, I think, is that data, is raw, right? Raw data, facts, figures, statistics. It changes as it gets used and analyzed and becomes information, which can then be, used. So data becomes something, turns into information where it's created into something. Both data and information obviously can be records for the records management folks in the crowd. And for the Latin fans, data derives from datum, the Latin term datum, which means something given. Again, as I mentioned, some of the origins in doing this was interesting to go back and look at. So in the origins of information governance, really, I think early concepts began in the 1990s, probably like later 90s, more so than early 90s, early 2000s, right? For those of us who can remember back then, or lawyers started to increasingly ask for electronic information during discovery phases of litigation. And in 2006, ESI, like electronically stored information, was a term that came out. That was quite a big deal back then. Everyone just sort of scrambling to, now we need to, can we find everything that we have electronically? How do we organize it? Again, early origins of information governance. The 2009 electronic discovery reference model, that was something that came out as well. And in 2011, that the term information governance was first used in a publication jointly by the ERM and ARMA working group. I also think, as I look back during those days, you could argue with me about it, certainly, but Y2K had a major influence as well. As I think back on Y2K, like, the world wasn't sure really if the computers were going to work, right? After the clock struck January 1, 2000. And of course, nothing catastrophic happened, thank God. But everyone was really nervous about it. Tons of investment went into it. The IT, right, information technology as a profession certainly grew and matured over the years leading up to Y2K with all that investment. And as we came out of it, I think a lot of organizations, people, started to were aware. We need to have a better handle on all this electronic digital information, because it wasn't too much earlier than that where we weren't thinking of those things. So this is, I mentioned the EDRM model. This is a visual of it from 2009. It's a little fuzzy. I apologize for that. It looked better on the train yesterday, but again, for those that remember. Origins of data governance, interestingly, go back even further, right? Go back about 60 years. So the 1950s, 60s, 70s, there was at least concepts of data governance. But it really wasn't until the early 2000s when the term like big data came into conversations. GDPR was also, I think, a big driver for data governance, data breaches as well. We had early data breaches, smaller ones in the early 2000s, like in 2003 and 2005. Then as we got into, even not too long ago, 2016 to 2018, there were significant, large data breaches. Again, all things that were just driving the evolution and maturity of data governance as a concept. So going back to IG, what it is, what are the benefits? So I've always thought of it as, sort of quarterbacking, coordinating a lot of different things. So it's really the holistic management of information within the organization. Again, touches on a whole variety of things. There's a list here, including improving data quality, boosting compliance, security, all of these things. Records management as well is a key component of information governance from the perspective of policies and standards, records retention, e-discovery readiness, compliance. And then I think there are other elements of an IG value proposition as well that's certainly worth noting, such as reduced spend and competitiveness. I think competitiveness is something that often gets ignored when people are thinking about it, but those that are thinking about it and doing something about it certainly put themselves in a better competitive situation than those that are not. So I think that's always worth noting and pointing out. Relevant to the IG, where it is and why we do things. So information governance, there is the ARMA's information governance implementation model. They also have published the principles maturity model as well. The principles, you can find that, Google it, it's on ARMA's website. It's basically a new and updated, improved version of the old GARP principles. I don't know if anyone remembers those. I think it's pretty good maturity model. What we're seeing here is the information governance implementation model. But the principles, good framework for a model, certainly good as a reference. You can certainly create and customize and create your own, which is something I typically do. But again, it's a really good reference, or you can use it as it is. The implementation model is also pretty good, I think. There are some elements that could be more explicitly called out or included. So, again, it's an implementation model. So things like fact finding, right? You need to understand what's going on today to be able to, put something in place, develop a program and implement it. The utilization of existing technologies is key too. I don't know about anyone else, but I've been doing this sort of stuff for like 30 years, and it's kind of expected at this point. Whenever I go to a new organization, utilization of their tools, at least from an IG perspective, are not where they should be, to be kind, and all that, and compliance and general awareness, also all good things I think to consider in implementing IG. Again, if people have questions they want to chime in, please do. So same thing, what is data governance, what's DG, and what are the benefits here? I think a little bit more specific than information governance, which again, we said is more holistic. So it's managing data as a strategic asset. It does include a lot of the similar things that we saw in the previous slide for IG around like, you know, security, all these things. So there's a lot of similarities. I'll move on from that. I'll come back to something in a second. Data governance model. So everyone's got a model, right? This is a data governance model. I think it's a pretty good one. Depending on the organization, data governance can be centralized, or it could be distributed across an organization, right? So we've got all these different elements around data governance. I'd say usually, from my experience, resides within the IT organization, can certainly reside on its own as well. And I think more often that's starting to happen. But under IT, right, it's, you know, it's security, architecture, databases. That's probably where they're focused around data governance efforts. But I've also seen it DG really under marketing, and that's probably primarily around business when they're doing business intelligence, finance, you know, data quality. Sometimes it's under IG. So concerns with metadata or document control and so forth. But we'll touch more on where this is going, where all this is going in the future in a few minutes. So why is there increasing interest in both IG and DG? It's I think one of the things that, as far as interest goes, we were John, Sue, and I were talking before this meeting started. I think we have a lot of people who've signed up for it, so showing strong interest. The reasons for it, there's just a lot of stuff going on. So big data, right? We mentioned big data earlier. That term was coined in 2005. We know that data and information has, you know, electronic data and information specifically, has exploded exponentially, right, since the late 90s and early 2000s. The data privacy and security concerns have also exploded since GDPR, which was in like 2016, I believe. Data breaches as well. We talked about that earlier too, right? So both of those things, just within the last 8-9 years, taken off. Regulations related to privacy, risk, globally have also really exploded, and all requiring more focus on compliance. The need for faster, better decision making to drive profits and stock prices to remain competitive, right? Other drivers, digital transformation. We hear a lot of talk about that. That's taken off like a rocket ship since COVID. Certainly before COVID, but COVID has accelerated all of that. Also, you know, AI, machine learning, also just going crazy, right? So much new stuff coming out all the time. And both DG, data governance, and information governance help fuel AI and machine learning as well. I don't know if anyone saw recently, I think it was a week ago, there was a 60 Minutes that they did a story on AI and machine learning, and they had some like little robots like playing soccer and stuff, and going on about how they learned how to play soccer, and they're like running, falling, getting up, kicking the ball, scoring goals. It's kind of wild. But again, without good information, good data, you know, all that stuff is important. The market for data governance slash IG is pretty large today. You can see here it's a little over 2 billion in 2021, and it's expected to be almost a $12 billion industry by 2030. Just in the next 4 years, they're expecting almost like over 20% growth. So huge amount of growth in a short period of time. Again, massive amounts of data being created every day. The demands around managing the risk of all of this information. Think of the breaches again, the discovery, the litigation risks as well, and the need to have on time, like immediate, authentic information. Again, is just driving this market. So lots and lots of change, lots of challenges, and with change and challenges also come opportunities. So there's many opportunities for all of us in the years ahead. Again, thinking, I think most of these can be sort of bucketed into a few different places like privacy, security, risk, and competitiveness, and maybe some degree AI as well. At least when you're thinking of it from there's certainly ethical considerations out there around that. There's also the need for new laws and regulations as well. We know, I think probably many of you have had the opportunity and probably taken advantage of the opportunity to play around with like ChatGPT. I think Google Bard is out there too. Not that everyone has access to it, I don't think just yet, but that's coming. Microsoft Copilot, right? That's going to be a game changer as well, and pretty soon. And I don't know. It's if you have played around with it, I think it's a little scary, but it's also a lot of fun. I've got a colleague that I work with, and we love to play around with it a bit. So some of the things that we've done with it has been creating a information governance poem in the style of Shakespeare. That was quite interesting. And so we also created some policies for like Microsoft 365, which came out pretty good, but also changed that and had these policies written in the style of Randy Macho Man Camacho, which was, so there's a lot of cool things, crazy, stupid things you can do with it, but it's a new world that's coming as well. So this is just a graph showing the volume of data and information that's being created and captured, consumed worldwide. Starting in 2010, I think going a little further, but beyond to 2025. I mean, it's a hockey stick, right? I mean, it's just growing so much. Again, just give you a representation of why this is important, why there's so much investment, why there's so much opportunity, why things are changing so much as well. I'm going to jump into some key terms that get used. There's plenty more, but we could go on and on with those, but I chose these as at least a good place to start. We'll cover each one briefly here. So structured and unstructured data. Structured, again, like standardized, organized, makes things easier to manage. Unstructured, which is the most abundant type of data. So there's much more unstructured data than there is structured. Unstructured can be anything, and anything means file formats, right? So it's video, whatever. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of different file formats. Unstructured can be any of those, which make, in all this, the volume and the fact that it can be anything, make it very difficult to manage. Data Databases are probably the best example of structured data, right? There's tables, rows, columns, all that stuff is organized in a standard way. When I think of unstructured data, I think of network file shares. um, in a past life, I had a 500 terabyte problem, unstructured data problem to deal with. There are certainly tools out there, I'm sure many of you are familiar with some of them, if not all of them, that can help to remediate this unstructured data. And equally, if not more important to the tool is having an approach and a methodology that you can actually use. Like I said, this is the most abundant type of data, unstructured data. So you can't boil the ocean, so to speak, right? You've heard that before. That's not going to work. So you need to chunk it up into different phases, if you would. At least that's how I've attacked this sort of problem in the past. Also, part of the problem is the unstructured data has been there for a decade, more than a decade, couple decades. Organizations are aware of it, more and more so aware of it, and but many of them have just kicked the can down the road. When I was in this previous life with 500 terabytes, and I first brought it up as we need to do something about this, the reaction a lot of people had was they'd rather not know, right? We don't know right now. We don't want to know what problems are buried here. But we did convince those folks that we absolutely needed to do this. And just some quick highlights of that. Sort of the first phase was to go through all this unstructured data and identify the rot, right? So the random, obsolete, trivial, unstructured data that was there, duplicates, corrupt files, things like that. That was almost 60% of the 500 terabytes sort of met that criteria, which everyone agreed we don't care about, right? It's junk. We just get rid of all that. The next step was to move to sort of a search and rescue effort. So we wanted to try and find sensitive information that was in there that wasn't being protected, managed, secured, that sort of stuff. And we want to, or it also could involve intellectual property and know-how, so lost knowledge. So we want to identify all that content, surface it, get it out of there, categorize it, and put it into the right places where people can use it and manage it, secure it better. And then apply other policies to the remaining content. Maybe there was data and information in there that we no longer needed. So we clean that out and just move the rest into the right, categorize it, move it into the right place. So huge issues. Most organizations have this problem. Many of them are starting to deal with it. Many of them are still not, but it's out there. Data mapping. So data map also, this is identifying data sets in existing legacy systems, doing like an inventory of what those systems are. What are the systems like? Are they transactional? Are they the systems of record? How is the data moving throughout the organizazation, throughout the data architecture? For me, I'm not a data governance person. I'm more of a RIM-IG person, but I do data mapping for whenever I do an assessment. So for me, what that looks like, and I would encourage others to do this as well, is really getting that inventory of systems, applications, and work with IT or other folks within your organization to get that inventory. understand, get people to help you know what types of content are in each system, how are they used, who owns that data, um, do any of these applications or systems integrate or with others systems, and if so, which ones? How much stuff? What are the volumes of data and information in these systems as well? And ultimately, what you can do is put together a literal map, right? And each system can be represented by a shape and the size, so the amount of stuff in that system can be represented by the size of the shape. The links, obviously, of linking systems to each other, so you know where information goes, and identify the system of record by, let's say, color. You step back once you have all that, and you can look at it. And again, wearing my G hat, you can start to see, and you often do, you pretty much always do, there are bloated systems with lots and lots of information that really are transactional. They're not the system of record. The system of record is much smaller, so stuff is just sitting there for longer than it should, basically. And it gives you a sense of, okay, we need to go and start to apply some dispositioning to content in these systems to shrink it and maybe move it into the system of record. So essentially, that's data mapping from my perspective. Data dictionary. This is a document, right, that describes the tables and the metadata, the attributes relative to data sets and databases. It's part of helping ensure data consistency and standards, ultimately improving the analysis. I recall, I think back in 2008, 2009, working at a large financial company. We built a data dictionary back then, and there were a lot of people working on it, and it was a pretty significant effort. Certainly tons of value in doing it, but not a simple exercise for sure, but it's certainly a very, very important one.
Colin, we have a question about asking if you can speak more on identifying systems of record.
Okay, good question. So we'll stop here. Yeah, like if it's, in some ways it could be what policies the organization has or should have as to where information data should reside and where it shouldn't. Usually, like accounting, financial data should reside in the accounting system. Human resources, the system of record would be the HRIS system if one exists. So like those core business applications should be the system of record for that sort of information. Content management or document management systems could be, including things like 365, could be a system of record for other types of business content as well. So really, you define what those systems of records should be, and that becomes the goal of where people should and the organization should be storing those records. So you want sort of that single source of truth, or as best you can, right, to that concept, just rather than stuff all over the place. Go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, just to add to that, Colin,
Yeah.
the best way I found with identifying them, talk to people.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden you get, oh, we keep that information in Box, or we keep that here. You find out all kinds of things when you talk to people.
Yeah, no, great point, Sue. Yeah, I find the same thing too, right? It's scary because once you start talking to people, and when you don't talk to people, generally folks in the audience don't really know, right? They're what they think is going on is much different than the reality. So you start talking to people, and yeah, you do find there's just stuff all over the place, and they're using it in all kinds of different crazy ways. Many people trying to do the right thing, but without guidance, policy direction, right? That it just becomes this chaotic mess.
We have another comment from Sarah. I'm not going to try to say your last name because I will goof it. It's a, for me, system of record is linked to ownership, who is ultimately responsible for the data, as Colin is describing. So some enterprise system may be procured and supported by IT, but the owner is the team, group, or execs who are responsible for its outputs. Oh, so Sarah Dem. Thank you for.
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely agree. So when you're doing that data mapping, that's one of those elements that you want to capture for each system is who is the business owner, the owner of that information. Yeah, no, great questions. So that's the data dictionary. Master data management, you may see it referred to as MDM. So this is certainly, usually an IT related thing. It's a discipline around supporting that concept of a single source of truth to enable better practices, standards, again, just consistency across data repositories. Again, next term, data lake. Data lakes are essentially a centralized repository that are designed to store, process, and secure large amounts of structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data. So again, everything, right? It's all there. And then the size limit is gigantic. Second bullet here gives some examples of all, again, that just can be everything. And some examples of data lakes that may not have the word data lake in the name, but they are data lakes and that most people are aware of. You certainly hear a lot about Amazon Web Services, AWS, Azure for Microsoft, Cloudera. The term data lake didn't become a thing until 2011, right? So it's a newer term, and it was really created. Data lakes were created to reduce silos in data warehouses. So again, this concept of just bringing everything together into one place, and it can be everything and anything, and to be able to leverage that. I remember the first time I learned of or heard of a data lake and learned what it was like in 2014, 2015. So it's still a pretty new term, I think, but an important one to know.
We have a question from Gene Evans asking if data lakes fall under any laws or regulations.
That's a great question, Gene. I don't know the answer to that, actually. I would think I don't know the answer. I would be guessing that it's not so much the lake, but what's in it would be under regulation. There's probably industry standards around the security of the lake. But no, it's a really good question. I don't know the full answer to that. If anyone does, chime in. I'd like to know. Next, moving along the line, data analytics and visualization, probably something that many more people are aware of, right? So it's making sense of the data, making it useful, being able to visually present the analysis in easy to understand format, certainly helping with decision making, etc. I think maybe somewhat related, but certainly a distinct thing on its own. But as I'm thinking about this, we kind of went back to back in the late 90s, started to learn about competitive intelligence. And I think there was even an ARMA presentation by an MIT former Gartner guy. I think his name was Howard Dressner. And I found that whole thing quite interesting, and went out and bought a bunch of his books, which I still have. But all this stuff. So these examples of tools like Power BI, Tableau, ClickSense, SciSense, and others. I think also it's still also fairly new, right? Power BI came out, I think, in 2015, but really only become popular over the last few years. Certainly, Microsoft embedding it in 365 and has helped that. But again, a fairly new data analytics and visualization tool. Tableau, I think, was probably one of the first. I think that was established in 2011. Again, not that long ago. I'm curious. I've used Power BI, ClickSense, and SciSense. I've never used Tableau, but any others out there that have used any of these tools, or maybe
Ellen, this
something
is
else?
Jackie. I use
Hey, Jack.
Tableau quite a bit. If you have a data lake or a data warehouse, it's great. You can dump whatever you need to in there, and I've been able to bring systems together and build dashboards with data from combined systems. So it's quite powerful.
That's awesome. Have you used any others, Jackie? Could you compare?
That's really where my focus has been in Tableau,
Okay.
at least for the last decade.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about it, but just never used it.
Yeah, we're actually looking at ways now to bring together our third-party screening tool, our contract management, our matter management, and see if there's a way to get all that data in one place so the GC has a complete view.
Yeah, wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. Very cool. I love it. All right, we're about 2/3 of the way through, so little break. You're welcome, everyone. Okay, take a breath. Here we go. Ready to go back in? Information lifecycle, continuing with the definitions. Again, probably a concept term that most people are aware of. Obviously, the stages that information passes through, the usual, creation, collection, processing, use, storage, ultimately, hopefully, disposition, destruction, getting rid of it. I found information lifecycle management to be similar to process mapping, right? So you are following a process. And either way, I guess my point is, I think it's important to know, it's a great thing to do if you haven't already done it. As you're going through understanding what that looks like, again, for me, you unearth a lot of associated business processes that reveal inefficiencies like bottlenecks, other gaps and opportunities to improve efficiencies, processes, and reduce risk and things like that. So not a new term, certainly, but an important one. Again, if you spend some time to figure that out, it's a highly recommended. Categorization, another, I think, very important one. Again, one that's, I think, probably very familiar with most of you. So by the type of content, using metadata, you want to boost compliance and regulatory requirements, in other terms like file plan, kind of similar to categorization as well. I don't use the word classify or classification because I've gotten my hand slapped a few times when I do, because that's often used for other purposes like data, security, sensitivity, things like that, privacy. So using categorization, often, great to and you should have categorizations implemented with your document content management system, including, SharePoint, OneDrive, or other places like that. Most importantly, I think it's, how to do it. How do you categorize information so that it happens is probably more important than coming up with a whole plan for categorization. Because I think and hopefully many of you would agree, over the years, the lesson I've learned is less is often more. So the more types of categories you have, the less likely they are to be used. Humans just aren't great at wanting to do that. So as much as you can make categorization easier for humans, and that could be, inheriting certain metadata by where someone puts content. They can get automatically categorized that way. Machine learning, I think machine learning tools also have gotten to the point where they're very useful. I can remember early days of MER in the late 90s, and going to sessions on sort of auto categorization with autonomy. And autonomy was talking about all these case studies that they were doing to categorize data automatically. And, it was super cool that they were doing it, but their success rate, their accuracy was still kind of low. I think it was like 85% or something. But it's evolved and matured and gotten so much better over time.
Colin, we have another question with categorization. And is this where you apply the retention schedule info to data holding systems?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And yeah, that's what I would do, is associate the categories with retention and even privacy requirements as much as you can. Great question. So if you're ever migrating from a legacy system where that may not be the case to a new, could be new records management system, again, content management, whatever. That's a great opportunity to do this and tie those things together. I think even some tools, some retention tools, have the ability to integrate with different content repositories. So you have your retention schedule there. You could have the different categories there as well, and then map them to the repositories. So at least the retention periods get automatically updated in those systems. E-discovery, another obviously important term, which I'm sure everyone knows. So digital investigations related to litigations. We've already talked about the term ESI, electronically stored information. I've looked this up a bunch of times. Every time I do it, it's a little bit different, but the average cost of an average e-discovery is about $3 million. So it's not insignificant, right? The better you're managing your electronic information, the better off you'll be, the less money you'll hopefully spend as well. E-discovery market, by the way, is today like a $12 billion market, right? It's huge. And it's expected to become an $18 billion market in the next 4 years. So we're seeing, again, that huge hockey stick rise in data and information, similar, rise in e-discovery costs, and just that entire market growing an awful lot. And keep in mind, just the perspective. Remember, ESI, electronically stored information, was not even a thing until 2006. Maybe for some of you, that was a long time ago. For me, that seems like yesterday. So things are changing so fast. And focusing on your RIM, IG, data governance, all those efforts, and with a lens around e-discovery readiness, again, just can help your organization save lots and lots of money. Dark data, and probably a term you've heard of. This is just another way to describe unstructured data. It is one of the huge risks of an e-discovery. I have lots of conversations with general counsels around the country, And more and more of them are very aware of this risk and concerned about it. 10 years ago, not as much, but today, much more so. It's also a big compliance risk, right? I gave you the example in a previous life, 500 terabytes, right? We found all kinds of stuff that we didn't want to find. Not good from a compliance perspective, not good from a protecting sensitive information perspective either. So again, obviously important. And with all this stuff, if, breach, litigation, there's huge financial cost to it. And there's also reputational risk as well. If hopefully no one's organization ever has anything like this happen, but if it does, it can really take some companies down. So all very, very important. So ultimately the question is, does information governance and data governance overlap or complement each other? I would say yes, right? They are distinctly different fields that do complement each other quite a bit. So they're both focusing on managing information, similar policies, the quality of the data and information, both focus on that, the protection, etc. So I think they complement each other very well. So they should be friends, right? Data and information governance should be friends. Information governance, as we said at the beginning, a little bit more holistic. Data governance maybe a little bit more specific, but need to work better, together better, I think, generally speaking, from what I've seen. And there's just huge opportunity to do it, and tons of good reasons as well. I thought this image represented the data governance, information governance story really well. At least this is how it kind of works in my mind. And maybe that's because I have 4 boys, all of whom were Lego crazy kids, and I've stepped on plenty of Legos in my early days when they were younger. But I do think it's cool, right? So the data, just lots of random Legos. You start to sort them, arrange them, present them, that data visualization stuff to tell a story, set a strategy, etc. A little bit more, we're almost done here, just a couple more to go. Again, we've talked to this point about the history, the changes, the acceleration of changes, the expected continuation of the explosive growth in this area. But surveys and studies, most organizations are still working their way along this maturity model to try and get there. Some industries, like you can see here, TMT, which is technology, media, and telecom, healthcare, financial, retail, transportation, etc. They're further along, but other industries are quickly catching up. And I love the quote from KPMG here. The move to digitization has accelerated, and the benefits will be permanent. There's no going back. Interestingly, again, from my experience, working with a 100-plus-year-old law firm, top 20 law firm in the country, and if you're familiar with law firms, they're typically slower to pick up technologies and things like that. But COO of this big law firm a couple of years ago told me basically the same thing. We have to change over 100 years of culture. There's no going back. We have to move to embrace this digital transformation. Some titles, examples of titles that you find out there: Chief Data Officer, Chief Information Governance Officer, Data Steward, some RIM, Information Governance titles, there's tons more. I don't know if anyone has any that they'd like to share as well, but that was a good list. If no one notices the Terminator, that's a joke. All right. So what can you do for your career development to help your organization? Again, get to know what's going on with data governance in your organization. Is it centralized at all? Do you have an established program? Is it in development? Is it decentralized? What's in place today? What's that org chart look like? You have a lot of similarity between the two, so integrate strategic visions, I think, would benefit every organization if that's done. And again, and align all those areas where both complement each other. And there's a list there you can review as well. Last slide, I wasn't sure I was going to include this, but I just did like a quick search on Indeed for jobs with the title information governance and others with the title data governance. And you can see there's a big difference there. But again, think there's so much that complements each other. I think data governance is maybe a little bit more of the hot name at the moment, but no reason why, both can't coexist and succeed together. Okay. That's all the slides.
Chris Bednar just provided a great link in the chat, which I've bookmarked, so I will share that with the presentation.
Great. Any other
Anybody?
thoughts, questions? Or comments, advice?
We had some, I love this, very cool. Thank you. Anybody wants to speak, feel free to unmute yourself. Lewis has his hand up.
High five.
I don't know if that was a high five or a I want to speak.
Hi, thanks. That was great, Colin. I wonder if I could ask your opinion. What's your sense about how we resolve the conflict between data's need to preserve every single thing and records need to run disposition? Where do you think we're going with that?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question, Lewis. I've run into that a whole bunch of times, right? There's certainly and there's great arguments for both. I don't know if I've ever come up with an answer that solves both sides to things. It's a tough one. I'd be curious if you had thoughts or anyone else on that one.
I don't have, I just wonder how much that keeps us apart. The
Yeah.
inability to come up with an answer for that, because my sense is that the data people find our need for disposition particularly irritating.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the other way around. Is that?
Right.
Yeah.
From my experience, yeah, that's very true.
Okay. So I wonder if you think of anything, please, because.
Yeah. Oh, I have a. So it looks like Sarah says she has that same conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a very common conversation with either with IT or if you work in a law firm with lawyers, because lawyers want to keep everything forever. Some lawyers, let's say.
I think a lot of it too, like the financial data is often used for historical purposes and trends and things like that. And there's probably less risk with that because it is what it is. But does answer the question. But maybe it's a little bit easier in some areas of the business than others, I guess.
That would actually be an interesting webinar topic on information governance versus data governance, and let's duke it out.
Yeah.
All right.
I came off mute to add a few things to that, especially now with my new job. One of the first people I met at Thermo Fisher when I joined was the new data governance officer. And we've been working hand in hand to educate ourselves and what the other is doing and align. And we've recently, mostly on my shoulders, but with him as a big supporter, have started to create an information governance council. And that's where this article came from and why I needed to use it. I held now 2 great sessions corporate wide, but one of the things around that is specifically looking at the R&D folks, the people who are creating new products, whether it's labs or doing experiments, and they have the same kind of questions. It's like, how long do I keep this stuff? Some people are telling me to get rid of it after 10 years, but there's value in retaining some of it, but not all of it. So that's some of the things we'll be getting into in the next year or so. Is like, how do we carve out exactly what data you want to keep for valuable resources, for historical purposes, whatever, but also get rid of the junk, so you're not keeping everything.
And balancing the risk in that
Yeah,
equation.
yeah.
No, that's cool, Chris. You have a council. That's really cool.
Well, we are right at 1 o'clock. We have a lot of great presentation, Colin. I agree. I want to thank everybody for attending today, and we will be sharing the recording of the webinar both on the ARMA New England site and our YouTube channel. So look out for it in the future, and we hope to see you joining us at our next event. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.